So I finally got around to watching Knights of Guinevere, Dana Terrace's new show, on Glitch, on YouTube, free to watch. I debated for a long time with myself whether or not I wanted to watch it a couple more times before talking about it. But I get the feeling that I am definitely going to talk about this several more times, even before we get any more episodes. So this is like my first thoughts review of the episode. I really wish I'd gotten to it sooner. I just did not have time to sit down for a whole half an hour and watch it. And I didn't want to, break it up, you know? I have been seeing, not necessarily spoilers about it. The most spoilery thing I saw was on Tumblr. Can I find this for you real quick to show you? I doubt it. No, it doesn't look like it. It's a suggested post that's kept coming up. And I've kind of, passed my eyes over it. Somebody summing up why they think it's an absolutely brilliant critique of Disney. And from what I got from it, the gist of it, it's not here. They are critiquing Disney pretty much exactly how I expected them to based on the trailer. Because this whole show is meant to be analogous to how Dana and her people were treated by Disney when making the Owl House. And I've seen titles of people's videos, a couple of the react channels, because I do watch a few of them, have put out videos about it now. And just from their thumbnails, I can tell people are really liking this. So I was really excited to get to it, and having seen it, I really liked this. It was so good. There's not a lot here plot-wise yet. This is very much a setup episode. But there is still so much here. The world, for example. Let's talk about that first. It's a critique of Disney. It's this dystopian world where Disney-esque parks that sell a realistic fantasy literally float above the surface in this classic old anime depiction of the authoritarian world above a world kind of trope. What's it called? Battle Angel Alita did this. Ruby did this. Ruby, that show I used to talk about, and I actually plan to talk about again at some point soon because they are finally getting another season. They did this. And the character that arc was critiquing turns full authoritarian, and people were surprised. I was never surprised by that though, because he literally lived in and ran a city that floated above another less prosperous city that was harmed by his decisions. He was clearly always meant to be an authoritarian figure, and that's clear of the park here too. Our main characters are Frankie and Andy, two humans, and an android depicting Guinevere, the Mickey Mouse of this Disney. Which I like that instead of going for an animal mascot, they went for a princess, because while Mickey Mouse was still the mascot of Disney, it is far more associated nowadays with its princess narratives. The centerpiece of the parks, which are what this world is based around, is literally a princess's castle. And it's so interesting. I don't dislike Andy, but I immediately gravitate towards Frankie, which is the clear intention of the narrative. Though I get the feeling that's not going to stay the same. I get the feeling they're setting up for an interesting arc for Andy. I think she's dying. If you want to know the truth, because I don't think she would have gone along with Frankie's crazy plan at the end of this episode, even though she does get fired from her job, unless she didn't have anything left to lose, literally at all. And she was trying to help Frankie with this Hail Mary to kind of set her up, you know? So that's going to be interesting, for sure. But I can't tell if they, like, literally live together, or they just, like, hang out together during the day, or whatever. Because we never actually see either of them sleeping. We see Frankie hanging out while Andy works through the night. And then later, unless I was mistaken, Andy comes back to that same location, seemingly to turn in for the night, and finds Frankie there doing her own thing. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Assuming they ever go back there again, they might not be able to after everything that happened. Like, these characters might spend this whole series on the run. But Andy is an engineer for the parks, which they kind of implied would give her some kind of, like, stability and security in exchange for people on the surface judging her, even though she's very low rung and doesn't really have any say in all the things that the parks do that harm everybody around them. But then she immediately gets fired. So that clearly isn't true. And Frankie works with, is it like a guardian or her dad or something maybe? I don't know. This grumpy asshole who, like, beats her up and shit, tried to tase her, collecting scrap that falls down from the parks to resell, I assume, to people on the surface who sell park memorabilia. And when she's not doing that, she, like, stamps the park memorabilia while also running around and trying to keep things going because she's technically minded and keeps the place running. So I'm assuming these are people who profit from the existence of the park by selling stuff to people who can't really experience the park for themselves, but who still want a taste of that world. And it all speaks to how so much of the economy in places where Disney has a major presence revolves around that, and how it doesn't really make for fantastic situations for people. Like it's Disney. It's not like they pay you well, right? Nobody pays you well. Why would Disney pay you well? But in places where the parks are a big deal, might be all you can get. But despite that, Frankie loves the park and loves the magic of it and the stories, and she loves Guinevere, and she wants to work where Andy works primarily. I don't know if that's, like, specifically what she wants to do, or she just sees the fact that her friend works there as her, like, in, but that's, like, her goal. And has, since she was a child, wanted to be a part of all this. So much so that she and Andy at one point, we see in a flashback, broke into the parks somewhere. It's not, like, we don't really see specifically where it is, not like we would know. It's not like we get a really comprehensive idea of where the different locations of the park look like. But they break in and they try to win a Guinevere doll from a claw machine without paying for it, using a little hacking device, which it's ethical to pirate Disney shows, by the way. Like, that can't be what they were saying there, but it really felt like that's what they were saying there. And while they're there, they encounter a Guinevere android, of which there are many. They're all over the place, and there are different models of them representing different Disney princesses. But this one immediately captivates Frankie, and she even kind of, we don't really see exactly what she does, but the finger on it glitches out, and she's able to stabilize it. And Gwen thanks her. And in another flashback, we also see a Gwen android being mistreated by her owner, the heir to the parks, though the owner seems to think she's fixing her when really she's harming her, and she tries to escape. She tries to jump down to the surface from the park. And later, we see Frankie find a Gwen android that's been hacked apart, that has fallen down with the other scrap from the park. And she's missing that same finger And at least I'm 90% sure it was that same finger. Like, they make a point of, like, holding on that for a second. And I love that. They didn't get the doll in the claw machine. But when Frankie finds the Gwen droid, she uses a crane to pull it out of the scrap. And it's like she finally got her. It was so cool. It was such a cool conclusion to that scene, really. It was all just one big sequence, and that conclusion to that sequence was really, really brilliant. It just took her a while, but she finally got it. She found her Gwen, and later goes back and steals her from her boss to try to fix her, because he was just going to cut her up and sell her for scrap, and they're using the excuse they want to fix her so they can get more money for her, but really Frankie just wants to fix her, wants to make her new again. And it's such an interesting juxtaposition, because this is that same Gwen that was trying to escape earlier, that was being hacked up by her owner, and also I'm pretty sure that same Gwen that they met when they broke into the park. And both the owner, who I don't remember her name, Olivia or something maybe, I don't remember, and Frankie both want to fix her, but they're going about it in different ways. Where the owner is very much going about it in a Disney corporate way and just lobbing off the parts that don't work, making things worse by trying to make them better, like what they did with Lilo and Stitch for the live action. It is so much worse than the original. It's this pale, hollow echo of the original movie. Whereas Frankie wants to make her back into that thing that everyone remembers. And I see a couple metaphors here. I'm not entirely sure I'm right about where they're going with this. I'm probably not. I'm a colossal dumbass. But I see... Let's talk about Andy's job first. She seemingly gets fired for failing to repair a different android in a satisfactory way, even though it was like beyond the scope of her work and she was being forced to do it on crunch time. Which, even though her job as presented seems more like it's based on like a Disney Imagineer or something, I feel like they're making a commentary on how animators are treated through her job. Like think about the whole thing around Human Teeth Sonic from a while back, and how they made their animators work so hard overtime to redesign that character into something that wasn't a fucking nightmare. And people rightly praise the studio for listening to criticism from fans, but criticize them likewise for how they treated their animators. And I feel like this is a critique of that kind of behavior. I already made the allusion to lobbing off the parts of Gwendroid as like a commentary on how Disney keeps trying to fix and sanitize its own stories. Then you also have Frankie, and there's something up with her. And it feels somehow like it comes from a similar place to whatever's up with Gwen as a character. Because, and we even see it from her perspective at the very end of this episode, she does not see reality as it is. She sees it as she is programmed to, as a fantasy world where everything is bright and happy and peaceful. And we will talk about that in a moment, because it says some interesting things about where they might take her character. But in a weird way, Frankie, that happens to her a little bit too. Sometimes it seems like she doesn't see the world the way it actually is either. And there's a really blatant example of it later, but that could have been like Gwen beaming something into her head or something. But earlier, we see her talking to these little robots while Andy is trying to fix the animatronic that she was given to work on. And for a minute, Andy does manage to get it working when Frankie says something offhandedly, and then Andy apparently tries it, and it gets the animatronic to work. The way Frankie thought to fix it a way that went against how it was designed and what the intention of it was. Because it was like, the implication was that it was like over-designed or inefficiently designed or something, but the way Frankie suggested to fix it, it worked. And it worked better. The thing almost seemed to like be thanking Andy with its eyes. And then Frankie is also talking to these little robots that are hanging out. And we see later her talking to some other ones, and we see it from her perspective. And she sees them as like the little animal critters that you'll see with Gwen in like the promotional art and stuff that's all over the place. And like we saw in the trailer and stuff. And she's able to talk to them, and they're encouraging her to go steal the Gwen droid and try to save it and repair it. And when Andy walks in, she talks to Frankie, and Frankie doesn't hear her. Almost like Frankie is literally on like a different mental plane than Andy in that moment. Kind of like the separation between Gwen's world and the real world. And then later, when we see Gwen as she really is in her world, as the beautiful princess, when we see Frankie see her like that later, we see those same little animal critters with Gwen. I think Gwen somehow sent them to Frankie to try to get her to help. I think ever since Gwen met Frankie and Andy that day at the park, she has thought that they were coming to rescue her and has been trying to help them find her. I think she might think they know way more about her situation than they actually do, assuming that she knows any more about her situation than they do, because I'm not entirely sure she can even perceive what it is. I think it's possible that the most she can perceive is that she's in pain. And I think that's where the title comes from, Knights of Guinevere. I think Frankie and Andy are her knights, even though there are other creatures that also seem to be her knights, but as assigned by the park. In fact, I'm going to talk about one of them in a second too, because that thing and what happened to it was utterly terrifying. But whatever's up with Frankie, it is super interesting. It is, I think, the most interesting thing about the show so far. And I think it's an analogy for imagination. True imagination. Not what Disney presents itself as having, but the real thing. Imagination that can create new stories and change things for the better and create a real future for the company and its image and the kinds of things that it could do for the world, the real good that it could do, the real joy that it could bring. I think what happened is Frankie suggested a new and imaginative way to fix Andy's animatronic, a way that wasn't approved by the park, but was better, that made the animatronic, the story, the world better. And when Andy took it back and showed that way of repairing it, her bosses said, no, that's not how we do it. That's wrong. It's not the way the corporation wants us to do this. It's a conflict between the artistic side and the corporate side. And I think Gwen falls into like a similar area to that. I think she's representative of the stories and the difference in treatment of those stories by the corporate side and the creative side. The struggle between the corporate and the creative for control and the ability to direct those stories. Something that Dana Terrace would know a lot about. And I think Gwen as a story explains thematically why she can't perceive the world as it really is. It's possible because, like, we don't see her perceive the world differently, and we don't see her perspective at all until her damaged eye opens up when they try to reboot her. So I think they might be going for a one eye sees the truth, one eye sees the fiction kind of thing, which would be really sick. That's always cool. But I don't know if Gwen as a character will ever fully be able to perceive the world as it actually is. Because as a story, as the representation of a story, of fiction, she's always going to, like, her existence, the contents of her being are always going to be non-congruent with reality. And so I think there's two different ways they could be going with this. That they try to make the world more like the ideal fantasy as she sees it, to try to improve their world and bring it more in line with the best that it could be, so that Gwen can perceive closer to what reality actually is and kind of find a life for herself. Or they're going to go the route of, like, the art taking on a life of its own and her gaining, like, real sentience, and then being able to perceive the world the way it is and maybe help make things better. Because even though this is clearly a scathing criticism of Disney, Gwen is a victim. Gwen, as a representation of the stories and the dream of Disney, is presented as a victim. While yes, you can feel the animosity that Dana Terrace has towards Disney after making the Owl House for them, you can still feel the love for Disney here, for what Disney means to so many children, and for what it could represent if it just wasn't what it is. And so the whole metaphor of rescuing Gwen and helping her to return to something more like what she was originally meant to be seems to be them wishing that Disney would become more like the thing that it presents itself as. And I think that's a worthwhile wish to have, because Disney, if it could actually do for the world what it does for children in their imaginations before they grow old enough to understand the reality, that'd be fantastic. That'd be a boon for society. It would be a boon for creativity and imagination, at the very least. And there's other stuff to talk about here. While the people Frankie works with collect scrap, basically helping people to make a meager existence living off of the park, there's also, like, an implied drug element, which I think is going to develop into a criticism of, like, Disney adults and people who, like, get too invested in that world even after they know the reality of it, which I get a little close to that sometimes. That desire for escapism gets strong enough that I kind of fall into that category periodically. Notice that some of my twinkle lights fell. Please ignore that, I'll fix it later. I think that's gonna develop into a criticism of that. There's also, though, this implication of some kind of toxicity that it affects people who spend too much time in that environment of the park, which I think is going to become a criticism of how it can destroy the lives of the people who work for it, the Disney Corporation, that is. And I think that's what Andy's dying of, is like this, I think people are calling it blue lung in the fandom. I don't remember them ever using the term in the show, but I've seen that floating around. So that's all interesting. And the blue is everywhere. I talked about that in my reaction to the trailer. Gwen has blue blood, the other animatronics have blue blood, and that's what makes we see what I'm assuming are one of the, like, official Knights of Guinevere here. That's what makes it so terrifying. It was huge. It seemed to be a robot. It spoke like a knight, and it was trying to rescue Guinevere from Andy and Frankie. But when, and this is a massive, I've been spoiling this shit out of the show, so I don't know why I'm warning for that, but, like, I don't know, this just felt like a big moment to me. Gwen kills it. or seemingly kills it, mutilates it, beats the shit out of it, rips it apart, folds it into a pretzel off screen, so we don't see how she did that. And its blood isn't blue. It's red. I think that was a fucking person. Like an actual human person that had been turned into that thing. Holy fuck. I also think, God, I just had this thought. I mentioned the finger being the way they indicated that, I think, anyway, they indicated this is the same Gwen droid from the flashback. How the finger that had been glitching had been removed. What if... I mean, that supports my idea that whatever's going on with Frankie is analogous to, like, animation versus, like having, like, a focus group write your movie or whatever, right? What if whatever she did to stabilize the finger was the right way, but then Gwen just gets the finger lobbed off because it wasn't working right by her owner? Because that's the only way she knew how to fix it. See what I mean? There's so much to talk about with the show. I'm going to leave it there, though, because if I don't, I'll go on, like, a million tangents, and this will be, like, 6 hours long. Let me know what you thought of this. Let me know what specifically you took away from it, and which topics from it, which takeaways from it, you would like to see talked about first. So I'll know how to direct my content around this. If I don't hear from anybody about it, I'll still put stuff together. But if you guys could suggest some places to start, some stuff to start with, that'd be really helpful for me putting my thoughts together about all this, because it's a lot, it's complicated, and I'm a little discombobulated about it right now, if you can't tell. But I love this. This was a slam dunk. This was so good. One of the, like, recency bias is a thing, right? But one of the best animated things I've ever seen, hands down. And Glitch was the perfect place for Dana to go with this, because it feels so in line with some of their other stuff. Not, like, literally, but, like, tonally, and with how, like, far they're willing to take things. Just such a good choice. I'm so glad they're working together on this. I'm so happy that this exists. Even if I do come down from this and still thinking that this is, like, one of the best animated things I've ever seen, it's not gonna be, like, my favorite animated thing, unless it just, like, gets better from here. Like, it continues to get better from here or something. It's like, I think my favorite animated show is always gonna be Amphibia. It's not the best animated show I've ever seen, I don't think. Like, just objectively, right? But it's always going to be my favorite, and I don't see this changing that. But it is, quality-wise, and in terms of the story and whatnot, up there with the very best animated things I've ever seen. And if you haven't seen it yet, you absolutely should. But if you have, let me know what you think. If you go see it, come back and let me know what you think. Talk to me about it. Really excited to talk about this show more. In the meantime, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.